everybody, and thank you so much for inviting me over here tonight. Can you all hear me in the back? You can hear me all right? Where do you want me to start? Story first or story last? Story first? Okay. So one of the things I did a little over 20 years ago, actually, I took this 10-day class with Jack Canfield. He's the guy that wrote the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. And one of the exercises that we had to do in that class was tell your story. And we had to tell it as a tragedy, and we had to tell it as a triumph. And we had to use the same truthful history, our own personal history. And it was really eye-opening exercise for me, because when I thought of telling my history, all I could think about was the tragedy part, because I really thought that was the part that defined me, that made me different, that influenced me the most of how I am, and was the part that allowed me to bond with other people who had had a similar history. And then I realized when I had to do the exercise and tell it as a triumph, how, that was pretty mind-blowing, actually, because I'm still going back into my childhood, and I'm still in the same year, 1959 and 57 and 62 and all those years. But there really were two me's then. There were two things going on at that time. And so, the tragedy part of my story is that I was molested by my dad for many, 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 many years. I was molested by a priest who was a cousin of my mom's on a couple of occasions in the foyer of the church when our family was on family reunions. And I was raped when I was 14, 3 different times, date raped by people that I knew. And that led me to have, of course, a lot of issues in my life. The main one being that most of my life I was very suicidal. And by the time I was in my late 30s, it was so bad that they were going to put me on medication, and I really didn't want to be on medication. So we negotiated that I would go to treatment. And so I went and I did my 30 days of treatment, and was in there, of course, with a delightful group of drug, alcohol, sex addicts, and incest survivors. And what an amazing, wonderful experience, because, for 30 days of my life, I didn't have to do anything for anybody else except for help myself. And that, for me, was a big turning point in my life. And as far as the triumph goes, I was very lucky as a kid. My family we lived on the Midwest and the East Coast, and in the summers my family would go to the ocean for the summer and rent a cottage there with my grandparents. And my dad usually wasn't there because he was working. So my summers literally were like a parallel lifetime that I had, where I could be in the sunshine, I could be in the ocean, and I was in the ocean about 6 hours a day. I was the only girl surfer in Cherry Grove Beach, South Carolina. Mostly, there were hardly any guy surfers, mostly because there were hardly any waves. But what waves there were, we would try and ride them. And so a big part of my life the first part of my life was spent forgetting and not wanting to acknowledge that all of that happened. And then sort of the middle part of my life was a good, I would say, 20 years of therapy on and off, and this, that, and the other, trying to make sense of my first part of my life. And I'm 60 now, and I can very happily say that this last third of my life so far, not that I'm going away tomorrow, I'm not, but just my third up till now, has been really wonderful. And that's in part because I've learned that the tragedy doesn't define me. The triumph also gets to define me. And I also feel that it's an amazing time to be alive for those of us that have these kinds of issues. because the world is changing so much. Stuff is coming out in the open, and people can't get away with the stuff that they used to be able to get away with. And that is really good news, I think, for all of us. Back in the year after I came back from my 30 days of psychiatric treatment, I put on an event in Santa Fe, New Mexico called To Tell the Truth, Incest Survivors Speak Out. And our goal of that event was to let the world know and to tell the therapists of the world, which is why I love Habilitat. Jeff just disappeared there for a second. But to tell the therapists of the world that we're not damaged goods, that the life goes on, we heal, and you don't have to put us in this box that something that happened a really, really long time ago is made us, you know, we're going to suffer for the rest of your lives. And I had a lot of very well-meaning, loving therapists that say, don't worry, you'll have these issues the rest of your life. Well, you know what? That was not comforting to me. And that's not to say be in denial and don't have your feelings, because of course we want to have our feelings. That's how they move through us, and that's how we get lighter and we get clearer and we get cleaner. But it doesn't mean that we have to be defined by that tragedy. So this event was a great event. CNN actually heard about it, and they came and covered us. They did an hour-long documentary. And this is how old school this is. So, of course, there was no Facebook then, there was no Twitter, there were no blogs, there were no cell phones even back then. But they ran this show on CNN, on television, and they had 30,000 calls to the network in the first week that they aired that show, because you know how CNN is, they run things over and over again. And that broke all records for them. It just literally just flushed people out of the woodwork that had something to say about that issue. And so anyway, my name back then was Mary Ann Benton. I changed my name at the turn of the century, and Roxanne Darling is actually the name I gave myself December of 1999 to celebrate the turning of a new millennium. I wanted to do something kind of crazy, but not all that crazy. I found out after the fact that a lot of people change their names. I thought it was really rare. It's actually pretty common. But anyway, so that's my story. Any comments, questions before I go on? Anybody had something to say? Yes.
I like what you said, because we're constantly, a lot of us come here and we've been through similar things where we're told, you know, you're going to be an addict for the rest of your life. It's a disease. You can't get over it. And we teach people something contrary to that. Basically, we operate on the premise that there are no broken people, and addiction can be overcome if you make different choices and whatnot. So I think it's interesting that somebody that's not affiliated with our style of doing things has parallel ideas about things.
Yeah, we've kind of arrived at the same place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was our whole point of this To Tell the Truth event, and we made it entertaining. You guys are probably all too young to remember, but there used to be, back in the 50s, a show on TV called To Tell the Truth. And they had a panel of celebrities, and then they would bring out 3 unknown people. And it would be, you know, a plumber or something, or some unusual profession. And they would coach the 2 people who are not telling the truth behind the stage, and then the celebrities would be able to interview these 3 people, and at the end, the game was, you know, who's telling the truth? Which one will the real plumber please come forward? And, you know, if the bluffers were good bluffers, it would be really hard to tell who was the one telling the truth. So we did that skit, actually. And I was the moderator, and we had a panel of 2 men and 2 women. And we were asking questions about, you know, what it's like to have child sexual abuse. And so it was sort of educational for our audience. We had over 500 people there in the room, in the ballroom of this hotel. And then at the end, I said, well, will the real incest survivor please stand up? And of course, everybody stood up, because there was no one there who was not telling the truth. So that was our little spin on the game show. That again, 20 years ago, people still kind of knew what that reference was. Now, guys are kind of looking at me like, when is she going to like get to the point? But so that was our goal, you know, to try and make light of it, not to deny the pain, but to, you know, just create an opening, and all kinds of openings, in fact. Any place, any way for people to start connecting with us. So anyway, I was, you know, thinking today of what might I share with you tonight, and I was writing in my journal this morning, and I asked myself a question. How invested am I in making this stuff hard? So I've been having a little bit of relationship issue the last few months. And that question kind of just hit me right between the eyes, because I realized that there is this part of me, it's the part I kind of call the kid or my monkey mind, who thinks that if something is hard and then I succeed at it, that it's way more valuable than if something is easy and I succeed at it. And that just hit me today, and I go, that's really dumb thinking. Because I want things to be easier. I don't want them to be harder, you know? And maybe that's something you get when you turn 60. You just realize, you know what? I really don't want to work so hard at every little thing. You know, what can I make easy? What can I let go of by pretending that this is so hard that if I succeed at it, then that means I'm a really good person? You know, that's kind of like investing my self-worth in this very external, frivolous, in a way, measurement that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I mean, we all know there are some days that are easy and there are some days that are hard. And I have, you know, want to really be on top of it, that I don't let my monkey mind keep making trouble so that I can then rush in and fix it, so that I can then feel like that was really hard and now I get a prize. Who's going to give me the prize? Because what that does is that separates me out. That separates me from other people, because I'm always in this, you know, this is hard, this is complicated. And I started, as I was writing about it, I thought, wow, we've even done that with our business. We think we're really smart. We think we know more than our competitors. And so we have in the past kind of presented sometimes our business proposals as, this stuff is really hard. You really have to hire us because we're the only ones who really know how to do this really, really hard stuff. And, you know, on some level that's true, but on another level, that was kind of a setup for the client going, you know, I don't know, I'm scared. Maybe I shouldn't hire you because the other people aren't telling me it's this hard. I don't want things to be this hard. And I realized that was from insecurity. Instead of what I try to do now is, you know, and I've got these files on my computer from, you know, it's funny we were talking about technology, but I started building blogs for companies back in 2004, 2005. And then we stopped doing that for many years, and then I've started doing it again last year, and I found my old files from 2005, and they were these complicated 82 steps, and, you know, and now I got it down to 5 steps. You know, read this, send me this, we'll build this, I'll train you, voila, you're gonna have a blog. And it's a lot more fun to sell that, and it's a lot more fun to build that. And it's, you know, the complication, if it shows up, and we deal with it. And we are really well equipped to deal with that because we have all this experience. But at the same time, the baseline, the starting agreement is this is going to be easy, it's going to be fun, and it's going to be those things because we know what we're doing. So because we know what we're doing, we can make it easy. We don't have to make it hard just to prove to somebody that we're that smart somehow. And I just find that, you know, I did a beach walks on this. I'm just remembering this beach walks now. So beachwalks.tv is the web address. We started this experiment with video podcasting back in 2006. And we went to the beach we couldn't come up with an idea. And we talked about it for 3 months. Again, we made it really hard. We have to come up with some really highfalutin topic for our video internet TV show. We never could come up with one. So I said to my secret cameraman, my partner, and I said, you know, the dog and I go to the beach every day. Why don't you come join us and bring the camera, and I'll just talk, because I can talk, for better or for worse. And so we started shooting videos. We did one every single day for 402 days. And we've now, since 2006, we have 776 episodes up there if you ever get bored. So one of them was on, we had put a sliding glass door in a wall of a bedroom. And the guy we hired, he came in and he just bada bing, bada boom, he did it. And I was standing there going, wow, that was easy. You know, because he got the saw out, he cut the hole, he plopped the thing in, he knew how to level it, and, you know, it was amazing, awesome. I didn't have a clue how to do it, but he made it look really easy. And then he said, yeah, it's easy if you know what you're doing. And so there's like this full circle now of this connection of, you know, information, practice, experience, making things easy, making things hard, and at the end of the day, I do believe we have a choice. We can make it easy or we can make it hard. And if we make it easy, then it happens faster. It happens more fun, in my opinion. I mean, I'm sure there's a couple of you out there for whom really hard is really fun. And if that's you, have at it. Dig your heels in and enjoy it, because everyone is different. Everyone is different. And if we really believe that, then we have to believe that on any topic that we talk about, everyone's going to be different. We're not going to all be the same. We might cluster around the middle on different topics and that sort of thing, but we have to have that space for those people that are on the fringes. And I'm kind of getting off topic, but this whole thing of letting it be easy. So there's another saying that I have that I think goes along with that, and it's called, anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. So just chew on that one for a minute, because you've all heard the related phrase, right? Anything worth doing is worth doing well. And that's that pressure that if you're going to do it, you better, by golly, you better do it perfectly, you better do your best. And there's 1,000,001 books out there saying, doesn't matter what you do, just do your best. You've got to be the best at your field. You've got to bring your passion. And I had a friend, actually, a writer, who was writing a business book many years ago, and he was breaking out of the normal mold, but in it he had, you know, the story of a guy who was a grocery bagger, and he said, you know, he only ever wanted to be a bag groceries at the grocery store, but by gosh, he got up every day and he was going to be the best bagger he could be. And I said, why does he have to be the best? Why can't he just be a mediocre food bagger at the grocery store? And he really had one of those aha moments, because again, if we're going to really accept ourselves, we're going to realize that being the best at something is another one of those places that the group mind puts pressure on us. And maybe being an average grocery bagger is plenty good, and he can be the best pooper scooper, you know, because that's what he really loves doing, is picking up the poop from his dog in one swoop without having to get anything on him. I mean, there's all these ways that we can live our lives. Strange example. There's probably, so here's the sidebar to that. Shane and I walk our dog Lexi every morning and every afternoon. And I regularly criticize Shane about how he picked up the poop. Because I thought he would just get in there and make it too messy when it's not that hard. So guess what? I get to clean up the poop now because I complained about how he cleaned up the poop. So, you know, so it's just this thing. So for me, lifting the pressure, that's what a big part of my sub-message is here, is how can we take the pressure off? Because pressure gets our nerves going like this, and then it's just things get harder. Even stuff that we know, it gets harder. So anything I can do to back off the pressure, make things fun, understand that 90% of what I do in a day, I can do not only mediocre, I can do it poorly, and it's good enough to get the job done. And I just love playing with that in my brain, because the world out there is all about anything we're doing, if we're doing well, you know, nah, you know. Just reserve your best effort for the things that are really important to you, and pour your heart and soul into them. And they will pour heart and soul back to you. But we live in, you know, this kind of normal reality, and a lot of what we do day in and day out is we go to the bathroom and we brush our teeth and we eat and we sweep the floors and we make our beds. And, you know, we don't have to put everything on the top level of importance. And being able to talk to ourselves, talk to that little monkey mind of mine and say, this is not so important. I'm just going to get it done, move on, check it off my list. Let it be easy. Let it be fun. I think that's all I got to say. Let's talk now. Yes?
How you take off the pressure? Like, a lot of us in here, we give you responsibilities, a lot of so then I see where these guys give us responsibilities for when things happen outside, we're going to know how to handle them better. But like in here, we get all these responsibilities and the pressure start banging on, and some of us now might not think the way I do, but me, I get plenty of pressure, I feel. And how you take off the pressure and make them fun and still do your job in the best way you can?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a very open-ended question. And so for me, part of what I do is I try to notice when I'm feeling pressure. And I talk to myself all day long. I don't know if any of you do, but I find it's one of my best techniques, because I think of myself as having kind of an adult mind and a kid whatever. It's hardly a mind, but it's a yammer. And when I'm feeling the pressure, I try to, you know, stop what I'm doing and talk to myself and say, okay, what's going on here? You know, what's really important? Let me look at the facts. Let me try and slow down a little bit. So slowing down pretty much always helps me. I tend to get escalated because I can do a lot of things at one time. That's my, you know, my Shakespearean flaw, where the thing that you're really good at ends up being your downfall because you don't know when to turn it off. So I can do a lot of things at once. Today I had 7 client meetings. Most people I know would go, you know, and now I'm here. And I'm having a blast. So what I do is I slow down when it gets to be too much. And then I talk to myself. And so I usually hear 2 voices or 3 voices. So there's usually 2 that are in this dialogue with themselves going, you must, you can't, you must, you can't. Right? So that's my monkey mind, who likes to also talk to herself. So they've staked out that space. And then there's my adult mind, you know, that is either ignoring them because I feel like I know what I'm doing, or when I start really hearing them or I start feeling the pressure, that's when I go, okay, wait a minute, we got to go in and see who's running the show. Because a lot of times that can't, must personality has taken over the wheel of the car. And that's when I feel the strain and the stress and the confusion and all the other stuff. And so I talk to myself, and I try to use my, you know, sort of basic check-ins. You know, how important is this really? And on my scale of, you know, poor, average, and great, how do I really need to do this particular task? And then I start getting some information back, you know, and as I'm having this conversation with myself, you know, then another little voice will come in and say, well, but you know, you always said blah, 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 blah. Well, whenever I hear these words, always, never, must, can't, I know that's my monkey mind. So I have this little checklist of words that I also use as a filtering mechanism. When I know that I start hearing myself use those words on myself, you'll never get better, you're always going to have this problem, I go, oops, you know, I got the 2-year-old driving the car again. And so then I do really crazy things, like I tell her, you, got it, got your message, I hear that you're concerned, I think I can handle it. Go have a seat, play with your toys, watch me get out of this situation. And I make it a game. And I started that, again, a little over 20 years ago when I was going through a divorce. And I went to a mediation, the first one, and my husband at the time was very verbally abusive to me. And we sit in the mediator's office, and he just lays into me, yelling, screaming, you're horrible, you're stealing this from me, da-da-da-da-da, you know, I just had all that stuff for me. And I just went into complete defensive mode, literally curled up like this in my chair, sobbing, could not get a word out of my brain or my mouth, and it was a mess. And afterwards, I talked to a friend of mine, and she taught me this technique. She goes, next week when you go back, when you're in the car, sit in the car, tell your little small self, you know, you're here to play. Divorce negotiations are for grown-ups. They're not for kids. You will not be happy in there. And I can't do as good a job with you there if I have to be watching you. So you go play. I will tell you everything that happened when I come back out. And I tell you, it was like night and day. I went in there. I was grounded. He started round 2 of, and I just said, this is not negotiation or mediation, and if you just want to yell and scream at me, I have a lawyer that will be happy to deal with you about that, and I will pay every last penny that I have to that lawyer because I'm not going to take this from you. And I said it like that. I didn't yell and scream back. And he really had never seen me quite like that. And we negotiated our divorce in 3 more sessions, and we were done. And so I offer you that. Talk to yourself. Allow yourself to be, you know, a split personality. Let that be a good thing. Know who is your little monkey mind, your what I call my kid. And when she thinks she's taken over, I can guarantee you all hell's going to break loose in my life. Because she's going to run my life from the perspective of a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5-year-old. And as well-intentioned as she is, as smart as she is, because she's as smart as me, she's me just stuck back in time, she doesn't know how wonderful the world is. She doesn't know how powerful I am. She doesn't know how many situations I can walk away from. She doesn't know how many people that I have that I can call on for help. She sort of knows that, but it's not in her modus operandi. So she's just constantly pushing that panic button. I'm constantly pushing the easy button. And the more that I can discern or distinguish between which me is driving the car, then it's so much easier to deal with the pressure. Does that make a little sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking. Yes?
So, what are some of the important things? You say, like, you should save our best efforts for important things. What's some of the important things in your life that you save your best efforts for?
Oh, things I save my best efforts for?
Important things in your life.
My nature, I'm a people person. So, and some of the people in my life would say, that's your best effort? But people are really important to me. So that's one of the things that I carve out special time and space. I never had children, but I have a Hanai daughter who lives over here on Oahu. And I will pretty much drop anything and everything for her. And I was really lucky. For a year of her life, when she was in preschool, her mom went back to work, and I worked from home. And so what I did is I went over to her house every morning, Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock, so the mom could go to work. And I would get the 4-year-old up, feed her, take her to preschool. And what a, mind-boggling experience to kind of be dropped into parenthood for an hour and a half a day, 5 days a week. But she taught me so much about myself. And you know, that's one of those things that so many people said, wow, you gave up all that and you did that and, you know, all those things. But for me, that was almost, you know, it was my best effort, but it wasn't really hard because it was something that gave me something back so much. And I think that's maybe, as I'm just talking out loud, maybe that's one of the ways we find out where to put our best effort, is because it just naturally feeds us back so much that we want to keep giving more and trying different things. And what if I did this? And wow, you know, it's kind of like the, you know, Maui High School, they won the robotics competition, and I just kind of imagine them getting in the lab and going, what if we could make the robot do this, you know? And then the robot responds and it does that thing. And then they just say, well, wait, if we can make it walk, I wonder if we can make it sit and walk. You know, I wonder if we can make it walk backwards. And I don't even know what their project was, but I'm just using that as an analogy. You know, that there's that system that gets set up that where, you know, when you give a lot and you get something back, and I don't mean that, and I realize you could take that out of context and it's like only give to get, and that's not what I mean. There's an energy. Can you sense the difference of what I'm saying in the energy? So this little girl, you know, I take her on vacations with me, and I make a special point of carving out time for her. The other thing that's really important for me is consciousness, which is a giant abstract word. But I'm really fascinated by the topic, and so that gets a lot of my attention. And I try to use language really intentionally. I try not to let my little monkey mind speak for me when I'm under pressure, because I know that when one person gets agitated, it's very easy to agitate those little inner kids around us. And then suddenly it's kindergarten, even though it looks like grown-ups. And so I put a lot of care and attention into the words that I use, because I know that the words really have a lot of power. I find myself when I'm writing my business emails, I'll start to type, you need to get me this something or other by Wednesday. And need is one of those hot words for me, because I mean, people, one, we lord it over each other a lot, and we use it in inappropriate ways, because we mean to be saying want, or we mean to just be saying that if you want to launch this project by this date, here are the ingredients that, you know, belong in that cake so we can get it in the oven and bake it. And that's different than, you need to get me that thing by Wednesday, because then that person experiences that as pressure. And I don't want to create pressure for other people. I want to be the person they think of as who removes pressure. So I'm constantly editing, even a little short paragraph. If I catch myself using these hot words, I'll say, how can I restate that so that that other person wants to give me what I want, so that I can do my job, rather than me pressuring them to give me something so I can do my job. Yes?
I noticed you mentioned the therapist telling you that you'll be stuck with this for the rest of your life. Do you feel that was holding you back from your movement forward in your mental state of mind? Just letting another voice control your thinking? And do you think it kind of is the same as like when you start telling yourself, I can't do this, I don't know how to do this, I'm not built this way. Because it's like an external voice that you're letting control your thinking. Other than, like, even though when you let yourself think that, I mean, instead of thinking, I can do this, how am I going to do this, where am I going to do this? That's
Right, so I've kind of been forgetting to repeat the question. But maybe it's getting picked up. But so you were talking about, you know, when the therapist said you're going to always have this problem and these voices that you can't. Is it holding me back? Yes, it was. I was very afraid that person was right. And the nature of my neuroses was that I was afraid of authority, and I just assumed that everyone else was right and I was wrong. And so, that was the state of the art of therapy 20 years ago. The good news is I'm also a rebel. And so there was some part of me that was fighting against that. And I didn't have proof that I was right, but I was willing to put my rebelness, my rebelliousness, into seeing if we could make it not true. And see if we can redefine what happens to people that have really difficult childhoods. And what I've come to realize is that, it's almost like not all or nothing, because I don't think anything is all or nothing, but I think it's almost the opposite. It's almost that those of us that have had difficult childhoods, it is a gateway to all kinds of insights, Jeff's nodding his head, awareness, opportunities that would not show up if everything had been peachy keen. There's, I've fought against that actually, because I go, there's got to be an easier way than that, like to be an insightful, enlightened person. And I believe there is. I don't believe you have to suffer, because that's how I started talking tonight. But I think since I did suffer, let's put that to some good use. And let me define what that means for me. And that's kind of, that's my life mission right now is, I get to decide how my life is. And, that's that responsibility, but spelled with an A, not, response able. I am able to respond. We're all still here. I was pretty sure in my 20s I would never live to be 30. And, I'm 60, so, and I'm having the best time of my life. Yeah. Yes.
When you receive or hear positive feedback or hear something in a seminar like this with some methods that you think would be helpful to improve your daily life, like not projecting or not worrying about things that are irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
What are some ways that you turn that into natural behavior instead of having to consciously think about it every single time?
That's a good question. And it is just repetition. So I use a lot of signage around my office. I'm a sticky note collector. And that's what I did with the word need. I made myself hypersensitive to the word need because I realized, I love that you started us off with this question about pressure, because pressure really is, it's a central organizing part of the problem. And if we can learn to deal with pressure, that opens up so many other things. And for me, the word need packs so much pressure. I need to do this. I need to look a certain way. I need to get this by such and such a time. I need this person to like me. I need to remember all these things. I need. It's just like this escalation of insanity. And so I literally put that word on my wall in my room where I work, and I put a red circle with a line through it. And I reminded myself the only thing I need is food, water, some sleep, and, in Hawaii, moderate, minimal amount of shelter. I can live as a human being without anything else. I can live without no one in the entire world understanding me or loving me or liking me. I can still survive. I know how to go pick bananas and papayas. I can take a shower at the beach park. I don't need anyone. And so I reserve that word for really, really specific, truly life-threatening things. There's a fire. I need to get out of the building. It's an A-OK use of the word. But do I need you to like me? No. Do I need to get a new outfit? No. Do I need all these other things? No. So I offer that. Find a word, pick a word of the month and just start rethinking, does that word make me feel better, or does that word slow me down? Does that word pressure me? Does that word scramble my brain? And for me, that's one of the easiest ways, because we're just interacting with language all day, every day. The other thing that helps with that, and this is where we have a gold mine here, is if you have at least one or two other people that you can kind of share that and support each other in that. Because when you start to say, well, you know, I really needed it, and then you catch it and you go, wait a minute, let me restate that, they'll know what you're doing. And they'll be patient to let you restate that in a way that is supportive.
Did you ever get the chance to reconcile with your father? And if so, how was that for you?
Yes, so did I ever get the chance to reconcile with my father? I would say yes, with air quotes. So I confronted him about our past, and he denied up until the day he died. Other people in my family believed me and supported me, which was really helpful, but certainly not everyone. But I realized my dad had, I was one of those people that had forgotten a lot of things about my past. And as I was starting to remember, my father developed macular degeneration and actually went blind. I mean, and it's just like clockwork if you look at the calendar of how that happened. And it's literally as I was getting my sight and understanding, he was losing his. And he changed very much when he got older. He ended up having open heart surgery, and he had 5 different kinds of cancer for about 13 years of his life. And at the end of his life, we had made peace, and we had agreed to disagree. And I went through many years of not speaking to my family at all. I was cut out of the will and all of those things. You know, my father said, don't speak to your sisters, and tried to have me hospitalized and, you know, threatened me with a lot of things. And, you know, I realized, I was thinking about that today, you know, because in that genre, you know, incest in particular, or sexual abuse from priests and stuff, all of us have a different path to take. And there were some people that I knew who were very, you know, out and about and confrontational. And there were some people who never confronted. And there is no one way for any or all of us to be. We each have to find our own way. And it's one of the things I love about the internet now, because we get to learn what other people are doing. And we get to surf the waves that they're making. And we don't all have to be, you know, the Laird Christensen, Laird Hamilton, I always get him confused with the ad company. Laird Hamilton, you know, riding the 60-foot waves. Some of us can just be like where I am in the whitewater. I ride the waves that are kind of already broken. And so I think it's just, you know, it's another great example of how not to pressure ourselves, to feel your way through what works for you. When I was doing the CNN thing, was a period when I was not on speaking terms with my parents. And I had met Oprah in Santa Fe by coincidence about a month before our event. And I asked her, she was having breakfast at this little cafe on a Sunday morning, and I was working in my garden at home, and a friend of mine called me and said, Oprah's having breakfast at such and such a cafe, you have to go see her. So I just hopped in my car, it was completely dirty, and literally dirty, and went up to her, interrupted her at breakfast, and gave her a flyer. And she said she would send a video testimonial for us that we could play at our event. And long story short, she was also working on a special on incest. And my dad somehow heard about her special and had his people go talk to Oprah to make sure I wasn't going to be on the show. And it was a very pivotal time for me, because I realized here I was doing this whole thing, getting ready to be covered by CNN, and I had kind of broken the cord. We were very sort of psychic together. So he knew something was up, but all he could think of was Oprah, because CNN had never done anything like this before, and Oprah, of course, talked about it all the time. So he followed the lead, and meanwhile, boom, up, you know, I did my thing. I think about it today and I think, oh my God, I can't believe you had the guts to do that. You know, to talk about my story to the whole world is really what happened. But it's not my nature to be confrontational and to want to get in the pit and fight. And so, you know, I eventually, from myself, my family, to acknowledge that my father also, he has a tragic part of his history, and he also has a lot of triumphal parts of his history. And, you know, I chose to, make amends. That's sort of the word. We didn't really make amends in the technical sense of the word, but we made peace together. And it was much easier for me when he died that way, because I felt really settled. He died in 2009. And it was not a coincidence, I don't think, that, you know, he was on his deathbed and had been unresponsive for about 8 hours. And I Skyped in from Hawaii to Florida where he was. And they put the computer in front of him, and I started talking to him, and he kind of came back just enough to say goodbye. I was hoping he might say, I'm sorry. He didn't. But at that point, I wasn't expecting that. So that's just that's one story out of how many millions? Yes.
Back to something you were saying earlier. For people that have a tough past and have allowed it to define them, or continue to allow it to define them, what advice do you have to learn how to let that go?
You know, I sometimes think it's just a lack of information. One of the things I've learned in doing a lot of work on the internet and in social media is I came up with this saying, information is a tonic. And it's kind of how it works in customer service. A long time ago, at the beginning of blogs, GM, General Motors, had a blog, and their vice president of marketing was the blogger. And this guy was super ego, really brash, a car guy through and through. But people loved being able to leave comments on his blog, and he'd answer them back. And so GM would put out a new car, and you know, some people would not like it, and so the haters would get on there and they go, that's the stupidest car GM's ever made. I don't know who has approved that design, and the thing is too slow, and you know, they just ripped him a new one. And he would come back and say, well, the reason we did it, you know, like that was because of this and this and this, and the reason it's that speed is because of the EPA guidelines that are holding us back, or whatever. But he would just lay out the facts, and he would answer the people that were upset with him. And it was earth-shattering in the world of business, because usually the customer can't really talk to the person that's making the product. The person making the product, all they want is sales numbers. They don't want to hear about all the people that are having problems. And yet when people start sharing information with each other, then everything shifts, and they start, oh, well, you know, I'll give the car a second thought, or I'll re-look at it again, or, oh, you know what, customer, that was a really good idea. No one on our engineering team thought of that. We're going to drop that into the next planning cycle for the next thing we're going to do. And so I think people who think that their lives are defined by their tragedy, it's just a lack of information. It's just that that monkey mind hasn't been told yet that that's not true. And that, again, is where we serve to help each other, because one day, one of you will be thinking it's hopeless, but 3 others of you will know it's not. And that's when you get together in your hui, and you hold up that mirror of information and remembering, you know what? That tragedy doesn't have to define me. It really doesn't. And again, it's almost cliche at this point, because so many people that have accomplished hard things, they've got some kind of a problem in their story and their history that motivated them to get to where they were. Not that you have to go be a superhero, but just that having tragedy doesn't stop you from being a superhero. It can feed it. You missed my answer. You'll have to watch. It's on the videotape. Basically, I just said information. I think people just don't know. And once they know, then that information can start percolating in. And that's our job in community, is to, when people forget, or if they haven't heard that yet, to just say, "Whoa, maybe you didn't get this memo." Lucky you guys, you don't get a lot of memos in here, huh? Or do you? Do you issue memos?
I do.
What?
Verbal memos and paper ones as well. You know, we experience, not too often, because most of the people that come here, they're ready for change.
Yeah.
They may not know how, but
Yeah.
they're ready. They're making a big commitment to make changes and to let somebody else help direct and guide them towards navigate in a new direction. But once in a while, we get people that come in who, from my perspective, it seems anyway, that their very identity is defined by what happened to them. And the more we try to help them move into something different, it's like they're terrified to let go of that identity because that's who they are. And you know, it's obvious that it served a purpose, and but they're unwilling sometimes to let it go. And in a lot of cases, you know, at that point, well, maybe you're not ready to change.
Right,
you
right.
know?
Well, that's the superiority of victimhood. Everybody feels sorry for the victim. We direct all of our anger at the perpetrator, you know, using sort of the classic stereotypical words. But you can't have one without the other. And, you know, it was something really true. That was again, back to the to tell the truth. That was part of the reason we did our event, because people saw incest survivors as victims, and they felt sorry for us. And that's a real downer when you're trying to get your life back together. And people are going, "Oh," or "Oh, I don't want to hear about it. That's too horrible." You know, that must be this, that must be that. You know, that's where compassion gets kind of confused with, wow. You know, what I want people to say now is, "Whoa, that was interesting. I can't wait to see how you're going to get out of that one." You know, kind of more like a Hollywood movie. Because that's why we love going to the movies, because we see our heroes and our heroines get into these incredibly difficult situations so we can see how they get out of them. Not because they get into them because they're stuck there and they're sitting there going, "Oh, I'll never get out of this one." You know, where would James Bond be if, you know, if he said, "Well, I guess this is what I'm stuck with." You know, so it's about talking story and sharing information and framing it with people that, you know, yes, you get a lot of support as a victim, and you can feel empowered to wall off the world as a victim, but it's a lot more fun over here if you let that drop a little bit at a time. It doesn't have to be all at once. You know. I had this sense once that because of my childhood, that my electrical circuits in my body literally were plugged in the wrong places. So the wire for cold was plugged into the hot circuit. And so I was just constantly being confused about how life works and reacting in ridiculous ways. But literally just because of this mechanical thing that I was plugged in the wrong places. And the process of unplugging is very unnerving, literally. You know, sometimes it feels like searing pain. It's like someone yanks the cord out of the wall. Some experience in my life happens and that yanks a cord out of the wall. I have this dialogue with myself. Wait a minute, is this a good thing or a bad thing? What's happening here? Am I unplugging one of my old patterns? And I just have to breathe myself through this so I can get myself plugged into the new, correct, proper circuit. You know, sometimes it feels like someone, you know, I'm a switchboard in the old telephone things, and somebody just yanks all the wires out, and I'm just free falling in space. And I don't know how I'm going to land. And then I just try and breathe and say, okay, well, let's just line up these things where they belong. You know, I mean, I still occasionally have those physical feelings when the going gets tough. But I've had it enough now that even in the terror, I'm excited because I know that I'm rewiring things. And that's really cool, you know? And now it's kind of like, I wonder how much I can get rewired in this lifetime. Never knew I had so many circuits. We got a lot of circuits. And, you know, when stuff is really big and intense, you're doing a lot of rewiring all at once. And remembering there's a direct correlation. And that only happens if I don't go back into feeling sorry for myself. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you first for sharing that, because I think with a topic like that, it can be difficult. I can identify with a lot of what you said, and I can only speak for myself, but I think like a lot of us have been through certain things, and sometimes we do let that define us. I mean, I've been told many times in my life that like basically like a roadmap was picked out for me because of similar circumstances like that, and I think when we have that thinking, like we continue to do the same thing, and like what I hear in your voice and like when I hear you talk about it, like it sounds like you've turned like a weakness in your life into a strength, right? Like you've turned it around, you've turned adversity into strength, and like could you give any advice as far as like how we could use that to help other people as well as ourselves, like how we could turn it around and like have that insight? Because I do agree, like I think sometimes when we go through things like this, or like when we're around other people, or like being in an environment like this, like we now have knowledge that a lot of people don't know, and then you're able to like see it in other people, and like how would you turn it around, like not feel sorry for yourself, but like use it to like help somebody else, or use it to know more about yourself? Like I think that would be helpful to know, like how to figure that stuff out.
You know, that's been a little challenging for me, because I've been different places with it in my life. You know, in the early 90s, I was all gung-ho, and, you know, this whole To Tell the Truth thing spawned a national movement, and it went on for many, many years of people having their own speak out events. And but the last 10 years or so, other than speaking here a couple of years ago, I've hardly even mentioned it. It's become very kind of just, you know, in a way that's the proof of the pudding, you know, that I could go on with my life without it being my central defining thing. But there are periods in my life when it sort of shows back up, and so I try to just follow that flow. And I also try to make it about, you know, to the extent that I had a difficult childhood, that then led me to be wired in a hypersensitive way, that then allows me to be very compassionate with when other people are feeling pressure, even in a business situation, or getting a 4-year-old out of bed in the morning, to just approach my life. One of my missions is kind of unofficially, is how can I create less pressure? How can my presence be something that is like letting pressure out of the room rather than coming in and building pressure? And that's been really hard for me, because I'm an extremely intense person. Extremely intense. And I'm very demanding in relationships, and when people work for me, I want I kind of want their best work, or I have certain standards that I want to deliver to my clients. So it's kind of, you know, I'm hearing myself say, oh, I want to be seen as someone who releases this pressure, and then I'm hearing the ghosts of all the people in my life going, honey, you got some work to do in that department. But that's also part of who I am. I'm an intense person. And so being able to accept that part of myself and to be able to laugh about it, you know, is also really helpful, I think. And again, I'm so grateful to the internet community, because you can go online and read so many people's stories and how they're dealing with it, and all the projects that they're starting up, or the quilts that they've made, or the changes that they've made. I mean, the internet is just full of inspiration of people that have had it much harder than I have. And so I love that people choose to share or not, you know? It's like I'm not tracking the ones who aren't sharing. I'm just really grateful for the ones who are sharing their little bits and pieces. And so I think there's really an unlimited way that we can help other people. And a lot of times it's just by being able to look them in the eye the way we are and have that sense of knowing and know that we don't have to talk about it. You know, I think that's one of the most comforting things for people, is to be able to just have that space for a moment and say, yeah, you know, just sit here. I have one friend, and we hardly ever talk. But when we see each other, like at a social event, we find ourselves just kind of standing next to each other. And I hear my little monkey mind going, you should be making conversation. You're at a social event. And then I'm going, but I don't really have anything to say. And I just kind of like hanging out with that person, and you know, that's what we do. It's kind of fun. Yeah.
The monkey mind. It's an interesting way to put it. And we talk about similar things. We don't call it that, but you know, the internal dialogue or whatever. And I've often wondered, it's part of us, and I think everybody has something like that.
I do too.
What is its purpose? For
You know,
for us in general, but what is the purpose?
This whole purpose thing, I kind of might get myself in, you know, some hot water. I'm not so sure we have these high and mighty, grandiloquent purposes. I think this is a game. I think we are all part of the divine. We're all children of God, whatever words resonate with you. And I think we're here to play. And we've made up a bunch of rules that says this kind of playing is okay, but this kind of playing is not okay. And part of that game then is tracking all of the rules. And if there is a purpose, that is the purpose of the monkey mind or the small self or the inner kid. Because that part of me is the part of me that is always looking for trouble. She's constantly looking for trouble because she cares about my safety and survival. And she thinks if she can spot the trouble down there, then she can somehow, at age 2, hold the train from coming and mowing me down. What ends up happening, of course, is that she grabs all the furniture, she throws it out on the sidewalk, she thinks it's going to stop the train, and then what has she done? She's made a huge mess. And I have to go clean up the mess because she's too little to be able to move all that stuff back. And so, you know, I think that we all definitely have that inside of us. And that's why I say, okay, if you're there, we're going to talk. And I'm going to start learning whether I believe what you're saying or not. And there are still, 20 years into this, there are still some days I don't quite know if what I'm hearing to go do is really little me or big me. So in that case, I just decide, okay, I'm making this decision, and we'll see what happens. And then sometimes I go, I think that was little me. File this in the future, you know, when it sounds like this, that might be little me. But if I don't get all worked up about it and I don't get on my case, you should have known better, because that's what she'll say. And then I'll say, but you were the one telling me to do that, so you can go shut up right now. But, you know, it sounds like crazy talk, but I find it really effective, you know, because we all have it. I think that's one of the great things right now is that we're acknowledging these kinds of things. Great writers and artists have acknowledged this forever. Monkey mind is actually a Buddhist term that the Buddhists use about the crazy talk that goes on inside the mind. And I just envision it as little mini-me, stuck in a time warp. She somehow had my whole life experience, so she can masquerade as grown-up me really well. She'll say, oh, no, I think, you know, and it's like, oh, that sounds really good. And then something feels kind of squishy, though. So I start noticing, do I feel a little pressure rising? You know, am I feeling like, you know, time's not quite right, but, well, you know, I'm going to miss the opportunity, you know. And then, you know, you learn. And if I go into it saying, well, we'll find out. And it does get easier, and it does take practice. It does take practice. And I do this with my clients. It's fun. I have fun actually with that technique because I will use it even just with my regular business clients. And I'll kind of early in the game, I'll say, okay, now I use this framework. You know, Shane and I use this framework. It's kind of crazy, but if you find yourself getting all stressed out in the course of this project, you know, we got some watchwords. If I hear you saying always, never, need, must, you know, I'm going to say, that might be that little monkey mind that's getting you all worked up. We're going to slow down a little bit until we can figure out what the pressure is coming from, or what the problem is, or what the fear is, or who's stirring up trouble. Because the work I do in the internet most of these years, most people, I mean, I met a new potential client today, and so far she's had 2 web people really screw her over. She's an attorney, she's smart, but she doesn't know anything about technology. And so she's had 2 different groups of people sell her really inappropriate packages. And so people are scared of what they don't know. Right? Is anyone here scared, of what you don't know? Because we feel vulnerable, and that small self is going, you don't know how to do that, you better be careful there, and I know how to fix it for you. Let me be in charge here. And so, you know, I try to just give that framework, and it really helps. It really helps people. So, if you find yourself looking for trouble, pretty sure that's your little monkey mind kid. Say, I think it's nap time. You're not supposed to be up this late. Go to bed. And you will get your mind back. You will get your mind back. And some days it will just be a kindergarten in there, you know. There'll be 50 of them. And then do something proactive that makes you feel good. That's sort of the other secret, I guess, maybe to your question. Do something that feels good. And I think that if we have one responsibility as a human being, it's to learn what is it that really helps me feel good. Is it listening to a certain kind of music? Is it running really hard, or sitting really still, or swimming in the ocean? You know, reading a certain kind of a book, playing a certain kind of a video game. It's really important to know a few things that when you do them, they rock your soul, they feel good to you, because you can always return to those things. And that's another way that shuts up the kindergarten, because you get into a zone where you feel good. And it's your restorative time. And if you don't know what those things are, then you get to go on an adventure. And you get to spend a week. I'm going to try looking at flowers and see if that does it for me. No, that didn't do it. Okay, I'm going to try, getting a massage. That worked. Okay, can't always get that. So what's your backup plan? I'll rub your feet if you'll rub mine. I mean, you just figure it out. I don't know. You guys might have a no touching rule. Do you have a no touching rule? Yeah. Sorry. You can always massage yourself and get one of those sticks or corners. Make really good masseuses. Just lean it against the corners. So yeah. Go have your list. Have a few things that you know. If you do them, you'll feel better. And then notice how much your small selves won't want you to do them. When the pressure is really on, oh no, you don't need to do that. You're fine. Don't take time. No. That's boring. Just start noticing that. And how that's part of that resistance. We are wired in many cases to not do what feels good. Really feels good. Yeah.
You know only your monkey mind.
What if you don't what your monkey mind?
What if you know only your monkey mind?
What if you know, oh, that's impossible because you just asked a really good question that was not from the monkey mind.
Stating, like, for individuals, you know what I mean? If they only have one voice that they talk to,
Yeah.
several people
people have two voices, some have three, maybe some only have one.
That, I can't answer that because I don't know if that's possible. It might be, but like Jeff was kind of saying, by the time people get here, now if you're talking about people out there, there may be some people that are just, yeah, they're running 100% on monkey mind. I would basically say stay away. Love them from afar and let them know, just through what you put out, that there is a different way. Because, a person who's always looking for trouble will find it. We're all of us, incredibly competent that way. And unplugging from that cycle of looking for trouble and letting life be a magical experience that is not just about pain and suffering and problems. Yeah. That's a good question, yeah.
You're obviously very in control of who you are and the way you think. Well, what was your first several steps that started that for you?
The first steps for me were, I went to regular therapy because I started noticing this in my first marriage when I was, my marriage was not going well, and I just felt really out of control. My first husband had bipolar disorder, and it was untreated, so he would, be super up and then he'd be super down. And I was trying to help him in every way possible, and I didn't even know what bipolar disorder was. And so, I thought I was just unlucky. I didn't realize I had sort of attracted, I have this saying, I don't know if it's a good saying or not, but, water seeks its own level. It's fairly easy to blame the other people in our lives. Oh, if you hadn't done that to me, I wouldn't have this problem. But if I didn't resonate somehow, I wouldn't be in that situation. So my water was kind of flowing with his water. So I went to, first I did traditional therapy. And then I did some support groups. And I went and did a lot of different, when I was going through this stuff, there were a lot of programs, personal growth programs. So I did a lot of those things, week-long retreats. I did that 10-day thing with Jack Canfield that was torture. You think, you read, oh, Chicken Soup for the Soul, isn't that sweet? And it is. The books are very sweet, but this course that I went through was brutal, and I just cried for 10 days. But the point of the course was to help you find where your pain is and to know your pain so that your pain doesn't define you. I mean, that was part of it. So I've been so hungry to be happy that I've been willing to do just about anything. So I may be kind of an oddball that way. And I have said before, I would do therapy with Hitler if it would help me get better. That's how much suffering I had that I really didn't want to have. And that was from, decades of being suicidal. And I mean, why I didn't actually kill myself. You just realize that was just my monkey mind. Fortunately, she was too young to go out and know how to buy a gun and stuff like that. So I think it's less important the what and the how. Because once you set your mind and your heart in that direction, I want to be happier, I want to be freer, it's going to come to you. And it's not going to matter if it's this program or that program, no offense, Habilitat. Some programs are more successful rates than others. But once you decide you really want that, the universe is going, oh, I hear ya. Let me manufacture that for you. And then our only job is to kind of notice it when it shows up. Instead of saying it's got to look like this, it might look like 10 other things. And just being open to however it shows up. It's already on its way. Yes?
I had a question that kind of goes back to the whole
letting things, tragedies in the past define who you are today.
Mhm.
And I find it hard for myself, something that happened in the past, like not too long ago, about being able to accept it. It's hard because I partially feel I feel responsible for that certain thing happening. So can you relate to that? Have you, like, for things that happen, have you felt responsible for those things happening? You're the reason why it happened, and being able to let it go and accept it because it all narrowed down to starting from you. You're the reason. I have a hard time with that.
Yes. And that's that part of, it actually all to me still does play into the history. So one of the things that, when I've been my worst self, forgotten all the things that I think I know, have hurt people, or been cruel or in whatever things, I just remind myself first, if I didn't have the history that I have, I wouldn't have the problems that I have. And I do believe this concept of, anyone with your history and your experience would be having the challenges that you're having. They come along because the wiring got plugged in a certain way. And it isn't to use that as an excuse, because if you did want it as an excuse, you wouldn't be here. And the fastest way, to unplug when I've been the hurting person rather than the hurt person is to own up to it and not have a, what we call a shame attack about it. Because if I go into a huge experience of shame, I can't be useful to anyone, because that in and of itself drives me to want to then do crazy things. And so, that's another one of the things that has gotten better and better. Those videos online of for gay kids, it gets better, it gets better. It really does get better. And I've had things where, I show up at a business thing and everything is wrong. I've forgotten the right cable, so I can't plug my computer in, so I can't do my presentation. And in the old days, I would have literally wanted to just run out of the room and practically be suicidal on that. My sense of self-worth was so low that I would get on my case so hard. But I realize now, what can I do to make this better? How can I make this work? How quickly can I get to laughing about this? And it does get better and it does get easier. And there is a discipline in recovery that is it takes muscle. It doesn't just get dropped in any of our laps that I know of. I'm sure there's few people that it does. But there is discipline in terms of when the going gets tough, to be able to say to your monkey mind, look, I did that. I've made my amends. Anyone with my history would have had that same challenge. It does me no good to keep beating myself up over that. That doesn't make me a stronger person. That doesn't make me a kinder person. That doesn't leave me any brain cells left to create something fantastic. So you're going to have to just put it on ice, and we're going to move on. And be able to talk to yourself that tough love to yourself, in honor of yourself. And that's where your grown-up really comes in. Being strong and saying, I'm not going to take this anymore. Because is there anyone on the planet that hasn't done something stupid or broken a law or hurt someone else? I've never met anyone. I don't know if you guys have. But that's that kind of information is a tonic thing that, we have to keep reminding our little monkey minds of that. Because they are operating as if, I've never made a mistake and only everyone else has ever made a mistake. And they just need to be educated. Okay. Thank you so much for inviting me here.